Okay, yay, let's start over. Okay, goodness. All right, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining me today. I hope that you guys are taking a break and getting to eat some nutritious foods as we just talked about navigating healthy eating. My name is Hannah Peters. I'm a registered dietitian nutritionist. Um, I've worked in the hospital, I've worked in outpatient oncology, and now I get to work with Baptist Best Health. I'm going to do one-on-ones with employees and do programming and teach classes like this. So excited to have y'all with me today. We're going to talk about finding the truth, navigating healthy eating. So a little roadmap for today. We have a lot to cover in our 30 minutes together, but navigating health trends is where we're going to start, and then we're going to talk about nutrition tools and then practical habits that you can start adding into your life and your lifestyle. All right, so health trends, diets, and ways of eating are all around us, from the news, which has been very prevalent recently, social media, friends, maybe your neighbor down the street, or your family. You may see different nutrients highlighted, different diets, on product packaging, maybe the nutrient like protein. I think protein has been a big one here recently, or certain foods that are used over and over again in recipes. Maybe ads for you to try this new supplement or superfood. The options are endless there. But it can be pretty overwhelming as you're trying to navigate steps towards a healthier you. You may be thinking, oh, like, should I be doing this? Should I be eating that food or taking that supplement? So let's talk about that. A couple of trends that I've seen in the past year or so are high protein diets and supplements. So are either of these trends for you? Let's kind of talk about how we can think through those. When you see high protein recipes or even products that say like high protein or they highlight the protein on the packaging, it makes you think that you should be eating that way too. But should we? Protein is a very important macronutrient. It is responsible for supporting our skin, our tissues, bones, blood, and cartilage. It can help us feel full, so that can be really beneficial if we're trying to lose weight. It's also important for people with diabetes. There's so many reasons we want to eat protein. But there are some health conditions that you may need to limit your protein intake. So some people are going to need more than others, depending on their age, their activity, and their health history. So the best way for you to really find out is to talk to a dietitian or even your provider. Going on to supplements, you go into the grocery store and you see this whole aisle, maybe even two, of supplements or vitamins and minerals, shakes, different things like that. So are we unhealthy if we're not eating these? Not necessarily. There are some health conditions that certain vitamins can help with. If you're deficient in any vitamins or minerals, then supplementation is definitely needed. But it's always best to try to consume those vitamins and minerals from the whole foods that we're eating on a daily basis. But if you choose a supplement, be sure to choose one that is a verified product. So the FDA does not approve supplements before they go on the market. So you don't know for sure that what they say is in the product is actually in there, unless they do some type of testing. So USP is a company, US Pharmacopoeia, and companies can pay them to verify products. So they can verify that the ingredients listed are actually in there to some degree of what they say the amount is. So if you're looking for a supplement, you can get deficient, or your provider, somebody has told you to take one, then definitely look for one that has that USP verification. But instead of relying on those supplements, let's focus on eating a healthy diet. So we're going to talk more about that today. So can these be trends? be a part of a healthy diet? Absolutely, yes. But there's so much more to it. So we want to be thinking through these things as we see these health trends come up. So here are some tips to navigate health trends. Check the source. So who is sharing this information and what credentials do they have? Is it a reputable organization? Like I said, is it your neighbor down the street, or is it maybe the National Institute of Health or the World Health Organization or an academic institution? Also, taking time to review the research. That is always key. Be wary of trends that are based on like a single study. You can look for systematic reviews or clinical guidelines to know more. Number 2 would be using caution with extremes. The trends that promote extreme diets may lack balance or long-term evidence. So things like detox, boost metabolism, or natural cure may be a marketing tool rather than medically meaningful terms. So just use caution and look into it more. Going back to that number 1, check the source, look at the research. Remember that food and nutrients is also an industry, and so they are trying to get us to buy these products. So going back to the research and thinking through these things. All right, number 3, understand individual differences. We kind of talked about this on the last slide, but what may be helpful for me may not be helpful for you. So we're all different depending on our age, our health history, genetics, our schedule. So eating one way, one diet, one supplement, whatever it is not going to be perfect for everyone. Consult a professional. If you're still confused after you go through these steps, talk to your doctor or find a dietitian that you can ask more questions. And lastly, let's go back to the basics of eating whole food. So we're going to talk a lot about that today and just what that looks like, because I think today in our lifestyles, it's easy to just get the processed or the grab and go foods. And so what does it look like to try to go back to eating a whole food? Okay, so what is true? We're going to talk about some truths. Trying to create healthy habits over being perfect. So 6 out of 10 Americans live with a chronic disease. And researchers found that people who practice 5 specific health lifestyle habits dramatically reduce their risk of heart disease and cancer compared with those who didn't do anything lifestyle-wise. And so one of those habits is eating healthy. So diets high in fruits and vegetables, whole grains, unsaturated fatty acids, and then low in red and processed meats, sugary drinks, trans fats, and food. It's easy to get caught up in having the perfect diet or the latest and greatest. But what if we just focus on making simple, healthy habits every day, especially with our diet, right? Because our bodies have to have nutrients to function. And what if we fuel it with what it needs to function well instead of things that could make it function as well, right? So, for example, maybe you choose a whole grain over a refined grain. So that could be like choosing brown rice or quinoa over a white rice or a white bread or whatever it is. Something super simple that you can easily swap out in your day and making a habit of continuing to do that. Maybe it's drinking water with your meals instead of sodas or sweet tea. I know a lot of us love our sweet tea in the South. So just being intentional about those added sugars and what our beverages are. Are we drinking water? A lot of people also don't drink enough water. So that could be an option. Choosing a side salad instead of greasy fries. So I have a little poll for you guys if it's going to work. Let's see. All right. It should be popping up on your screen in just a second for you to answer. So, what percent of Americans meet the daily recommended intake for fruits and vegetables? So go ahead and click one of those options out there, and we'll talk more about that. Give you all a second to respond. All right. So I'm seeing a lot of 10% and a lot of 30%. So there's a pretty big difference between those two, but only 10% of Americans actually meet their recommended daily allowance for fruits and vegetables. So that's about 1.5 cup to 2 cups a day of fruits and 2 to 3 cups of vegetables. So thinking about your sides and what we're typically eating and trying to make swaps there to add more fruits and vegetables. That could be a really easy habit that you could add. We are going to learn more about what changes you can make for a healthier diet as we continue. So prioritize consistent, healthy choices each day over the extreme diets, restricting food groups, or the newest trend. All right, truth number 2, the big 4 for balanced eating. Have you ever heard the term a balanced plate or a balanced diet? Balanced diet is going to help fuel your body well to promote satiety, manage your blood sugar, and support your health. So the big 4 are going to be the whole foods, fiber, healthy fats, and smart proteins. So eating these things together, again, should help with that satiety, blood sugar, and supporting your health. So whole foods, I know y'all have heard me mention this already, but so much of our diet is fast food or processed food these days. So even the grocery store, think about it, is full of it. Like, trying to stay on the outside is the goal. There are some things on the inside that are still things that are good for us to eat, like canned beans or maybe whole grain bread, the frozen vegetables, things like that. But there's so much on the inside aisles that is just a processed food, right? So prioritizing the foods that are grown on the ground, or walking, flying, swimming the earth in their whole form. So, chicken, asparagus, beans, whole foods. So thinking about your day and like, what are you eating? Is whole foods taking up the majority of your meals? Fiber. So in my opinion, this is the hidden gem that most Americans are eating. Adults should eat 14 grams of fiber per 1,000 calories they consume. So let's say you're eating a 2,000 calorie diet, then you should be getting about 28 grams of fiber a day. So fiber is found in your plant foods, fruits, vegetables, beans, nuts, seeds, lentils, etc. It is digestible, so your body's not going to digest it and break it down. The intake of fiber can help reduce your risk of certain cancers, heart disease, diabetes, and help with constipation too. So I think going back to that 10% of Americans are eating fruits and vegetables. So a lot of us probably aren't meeting that fiber intake. So I think it'd be really interesting for you to track your fiber intake for a day and just see where you stand on this. If you're eating that 2,000 calories and about 28 grams, trying to get 28 grams a day. Healthy fats. So fats get a bad rep, but our bodies need them. So they're essential for energy, cell function, absorption of nutrients, and hormone production. Instead of eating saturated or trans fats, those are the ones that are going to increase your risk of heart disease and cholesterol. Choose unsaturated fats. So these are going to be olive oil, avocado oil, nuts, seeds, fatty fish, avocados. So choosing those over your animal saturated fats and your trans fats. And then lastly, your smart protein. So y'all heard me talk about protein and how important it is. Protein is found in meat, poultry, fish, seafood, soy products like tofu or tempeh, beans, grains, and dairy. Recommendations are to try to avoid processed meat. So people don't like me when I tell you all this, but bacon, deli meat, sausage, hot dogs, etc. Foods like that, especially for reducing your risk of certain cancers. So trying to avoid those foods and then limiting your red meat to 18 ounces a week. Some other things to think about when you choose proteins, try to choose leaner options. So cuts that have loin or round in them are going to be leaner. Your poultry that doesn't have any skin is going to be leaner. And then you also could consider doing a plant-based protein instead of doing the animal proteins. So again, when we combine all four parts of this puzzle, we're going to feel full longer and support our body's nutrients. All right, so two truths and a lie. Hopefully y'all have heard of that game before. The lie is that there's a one size fits all. We've kind of talked about this, but we all have our own personal goals. We have different backgrounds, different culture, preferences. People often ask me to make them a meal plan. I'm like, well, I need to know what you like and you don't like before I go ahead and come up with this whole plan and you tell me I'm not going to eat that. So lifestyle, access, what grocery stores do you have available to you? Because I'm in Memphis, Tennessee. I'm going to have different grocery stores than somebody in like South Mississippi, wherever you are. So having to take into consideration in all these things, and so there's not a perfect one size fits all when it comes to nutrition. All right, so that gets us into our practical habits. So with all the trends going in and out, a healthy balanced plate always remains. Instead of learning a diet, let's create a healthy lifestyle. Part of building a healthy lifestyle is building this healthy plate. So I have a question for you all. Should be coming up. Just a yes or no question. So does your plate look like this balanced plate for at least 2 meals a day? Do you think that you're having half of your plate being fruits and vegetables, 1/4 of the plate being a protein, and 1/4 of the plate being a grain? All right, so it looks like about 89% of you guys are saying no. So it sounds like we have a lot of area that we can improve on. And so just making small changes every day to create habits, healthy habits over just perfection, right? So with this plate, you can see the left half is going to be fruits and vegetables. The top right, you have your healthy proteins like we just talked about. The bottom right is going to be your whole grains. The whole grains have fiber, they have micronutrients, and carbs. And so refined grains, which are like your white grains, those are just going to have the carb. They take out the fiber and the vitamins. So choosing whole grains is going to be our better option. And then we want to drink water with our meals. You can add dairy where you see fit. So dairy has calcium, vitamin D, protein, but I know everybody can't tolerate dairy. So that's a little different for everyone. Season your meals without added salt. You can use herbs and spices. Lots of benefits from those as well. And then using our healthy fats with cooking or enhancing the flavor of the meal. So we just kind of talked about that. So I want you to make a mental note of this plate, and it's on your handout as well. And look at the colors. You know, most of our plate, I would say, is typically brown. or shades of brown. So this has lots of color. That's what we want our meals to look like. We're going to get different nutrients from the different colored foods too. So think in your mind, write it down. How can you make your meals look more like this? Practical habit number 2 is label check. If you are not familiar with label reading, it can be pretty overwhelming. There's a lot to look at, and it's all really great information. I would encourage you to go to the QR code on your handout and look at the FDA's website and learn a little more about that. But we're going to talk about 3 different parts of the label to be looking at. So fiber, I mentioned how important fiber is. So just be looking at that and comparing products. So if you look at a white pasta noodle versus a whole grain noodle, there's a 4-gram fiber difference between the two. And so that doesn't sound like a lot, but it adds up. So looking for the fiber. Does the food have any fiber in it, or could I make a simple swap to have more fiber in it? I will say too, as you're increasing your fiber intake, if you don't eat a lot already, make sure you increase your water intake too. Added sugars, fortunately on the nutrition facts label, you can see that added sugars under the total sugars. So they're telling you how much sugar is added to that food that's not already in there naturally. So our next poll is going to be, how many grams of added sugars do Americans eat on average per day? So think about that real quick and go ahead and shoot your answer in. All right, we're kind of split on this one. So nobody picked 26. So we got 42, 53, and 71. The correct answer is 71. So the average American consumes 71 grams of added sugar daily. And studies show that as we intake more added sugars, it increases your risk for obesity and other chronic health issues. So for women, you want to try to limit to 25 grams of added sugars a day, and for men, 36 grams a day. And so be looking at those added sugars. And lastly, sodium. Sodium is something that we also eat too much of. So on average, we eat more than 3,300 milligrams of sodium daily. And the American Heart Association recommends 2,300 milligrams, which is 1 teaspoon a day. And they're leaning more towards 1,500 milligrams. So less than, I would say, 2,300. So that's something else that we really need to be looking at. As we eat more than the recommended daily allowance, it increases your risk for hypertension and cardiovascular disease. So if this is your first experience looking at that nutrition facts label, again, look at that QR code on your handout. Another thing to consider is that if you don't have a nutrition facts label for the food, you can look it up on Calorie King, on different websites. If you're at a chain restaurant, they're legally required to have that, so you can ask for it or look it up ahead of time, which leads us into our next practical habit: plan ahead for success. So we all have learned a lot of great information, but now we need to think about how we're going to put it into practice, which this is like one of my favorite things to talk about because it is key to actually meeting our goals. So here's your planning checklist. Review your week, get out a pen and paper, write down what you have going on each day. Do you have, are you going to the gym? Do you have church one night? Does your child have soccer practice? Whatever it is, write down your week, figure out how many meals you need, figure out the recipes that fit those schedules and your goals for your health, right? So if you know that you have something going on that night, maybe you choose a crock pot for that day, or you're cooking the night before so that you have leftovers for that. So thinking strategically so that you're not having to cook every night either, if you don't want to, and choosing recipes that fit your schedule. Create a grocery list and go shopping. Sometimes choosing a day to do that and doing it weekly can be really helpful. And then after you get your groceries back to your home, if you need to cut or prep anything for the week, go ahead and do that. Sometimes I will go ahead and chop up some strawberries, and that makes me more likely to eat them rather than if I just keep them in the container. So figure out what works best for you. So take a minute and think about when and how you could do this, what day of the week, where would you find your recipes, how would you grocery shop, and when would you do it, and then write it down and try to stick with it. All right, so now we have a few minutes left, but I have some examples of some meals too that may get you started. So these first two are some breakfast options. You could also eat it for dinner or lunch. But a protein bowl with some vegetables, avocado, eggs, ground turkey, quinoa, feta, seasoning. So just trying to think about that whole plate and how we can add those pieces in. A veggie omelet with whole wheat toast and maybe peaches or another fruit on the side is another great breakfast option. For lunch, I know people need something quick and easy a lot of the time. So maybe you have a bento box with some type of protein, some raw vegetables, fruit, some nuts, some cheese, and maybe some whole wheat crackers. Tuna salad is another really easy one. You can add different vegetables in that, like celery and onion. Maybe you have some fruit on the side. You could also put nuts in your tuna salad, and using Greek yogurt for a little extra protein and maybe a little healthier than mayo and other options. Crock-pot chicken tacos is one of my favorites. Super easy. Putting chicken and salsa and maybe some taco seasoning in your crock pot. And then you can have it as a bowl, tacos, nachos. Key here is adding these extra vegetables in those. So you see bell peppers, some black beans. You could do squash, onion, zucchini, so many options. And then sheet pan, salmon, and veggies. So this can all go on one pan, make it easy for cleanup. Your salmon, the veggies on the side. So we have asparagus and yellow squash here over some brown rice, with some olive oil on it and rosemary for seasoning. So hopefully that gives you guys some ideas of how to actually take that plate and put it into your day. All right, so in summary, eating healthy is not perfect. We're humans, and yeah, like we're not perfect. It's very individualized. Eating whole foods, we're going to try to eat whole foods consistently. Eating healthy is also just staying curious and asking questions and looking back at that research. And lastly, eating healthy takes planning ahead. So our last poll for the day is, what is your next step towards eating a healthier diet? So this one just gets you to free response here. It could be something really simple, but I want you to think through all the things we just talked about, which was a lot, and think about what your next step is. Our goal, right, is to eat healthy, but maybe it's just adding one vegetable into your dinner at for the next week, you know? So making smart goals that are specific and achievable, and then building on those as time goes. All right, I see a weekly meal planning, fiber intake. Yay, love that. Vegetables and fruit, planning meals, food prep. Great. I'm glad this is getting you guys thinking about how you can actually put this into your life. because you're going to get off this and probably go back to work and then you may forget. So taking that time to think right now is super important. Thank you guys for sharing with me. I appreciate the interaction. If you have any questions, you can go ahead and add those in the chat. Otherwise, this is my contact information. Feel free to email me if you have any questions or want to meet. We can do that. But I appreciate you guys for joining me today and hope that you learned something to take away for the next week for your life. Thank you guys.